So that brings me to another comparison between the savings and loan banks and the crypto industry, which is the fact that it is aggressive in its marketing towards quote unquote Main Street, and bringing in regular people as a in your incredibly dangerous and risky scheme and for the wealthiest involved to make money. Cryptocurrency is we understand it's like a Ponzi scheme. It's a multi-level marketing scheme, and the people who are going to be making the most money from this are the people who got in really early and bought a bunch of bulk of cryptocurrency. And it doesn't matter what coin you're using; it is the same every step of the way. Um, what were some of those comparisons in the sense that this was both seem to me a really direct way to rip off regular people through almost direct marketing schemes.
Right. I mean, that's a really good way of putting it. Social media is functionally a platform for direct marketing schemes more than anything else. It's just the only, it's the only way to privately administer something like the internet, is that it just in the end becomes like kind of this sort of like the arc of the internet is just the proliferation of direct marketing schemes under one guise or another, subsidized by investors until they are able to achieve escape velocity in one way or another. See Amazon, for example. But I guess in the case of crypto, weighed against SNL, the one thing that is a really important point of departure between the two, I would say, in that regard, actually, is that the SNLs, were they benefited from having a tidy, stable pillars of the communities, like your local anti-communist zealot. He may have run an SNL. It was not considered a particularly a place for volatile I think the perspective, the popular sentiment would not have thought of SNLs as the kind of place of any sort of financial ingenuity, chicanery or legitimate.
In fact, it was probably marketed as the opposite, or thought of as the opposite, just based on its initial construction, which rapidly changed in the 80s.
Yes. And I think that the other way to think about it then with crypto is that it's like, well, in the case of crypto, crypto comes about and emerges in what, a lot of people now call the zero interest rate period. And that refers to the fact that since the financial crisis, we had, credit was, close to free if you were able to access it. Meaning, if you were the kind of person able to open lines of credit, borrow, for credit cards, auto loans, home financing, etc. And now that we are seeing interest rates tighten, in that zero interest rate period, I mean, to me, crypto is just sort of a way of it is only explicable as an investor phenomenon when you are looking for things for investors, people who represent big institutional investors, hedge funds, pension funds, when they are looking for things to invest in, and they're not seeing anything that says, well, this will give me enough return. Because if every stock is it's a kind of, we're talking about price inflation now, but that's coming on the tail end of asset inflation.
Yeah.
What can you, how valuable can, AMC really be? And that's part of it is the power of retail stock investing is also not really well understood, or I think theorized at this point, but it's clearly shaping this in a lot of ways, and also shaping people's exposure to it. I think there's one thing I would really like to emphasize is that I think, especially as it relates to crypto, there's just a whole lot that we don't know, other than that, it is stitched together with bubble gum and being presented as concrete. And that is, when, I mean, that's sort of the ball game when people are trying to raise money while doing that, let alone sell a political campaign. I mean, to me, it's fairly frightening.
It's psychotic, but in terms of just the volatility, we need to look no further than the example that you give at the start of your piece here, which is the TerraUSD, or which is essentially the dollar peg for Luna. And a few months ago, Luna was essentially worthless, fell to $0 in value, something close to that. And the crypto industry essentially responded and dressed it up as a Ponzi scheme in order to continue to inflate the price of Luna and its stable coin as associated with it. Just take us through what happened there, and how naked, frankly, what was the CEO's name? The guy who,
Oh,
uh,
Do Kwon.
yeah,
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 Do
just
Kwon was like, yeah, like he's like, do you want to be? He had been like one of those like, oh, so you're poor, you want to be poor guys.
oh
When
yeah,
people would like criticize his business. No, I mean, in the case of Terra, they offered TerraUSD. Basically, their product was sort of the most, it's a fairly humdrum proposition. We have this currency called Luna, and you will always be able to like withdraw it at like $1 peg, and that's because the value of Luna is staked to this thing called Terra, which through a process that we call a protocol can accrue value that we pay out. That is a marvelous way to disguise a Ponzi scheme, because you're basically saying we will collect money in box A, as Sam Bankman-Fried memorably described it, and through a process that we're not really going to be able to describe other than to say that it rocks, we're going to add value to what's in A while taking the money that you're giving us to spend on things that will allow for even more money to come in and be put in box A. And now you may be wondering, like, what is box B? Box B is, alternative currencies and other, offerings and things that you can do to continue to draw in, investor interest. I think that, again, there is no company in this space that has like established a business model that can justify that sort of, money burning. Like, to be clear, venture capital, like you can invest in, Amazon lost money obviously, but I mean, heck, like, oil and, diggers and wildcatters have lost money all the time. It's a bit, luck has a lot to do with it. But in this case, it's not about luck. It's just that, like, yeah, these people, like, it turns out that like investing in stuff that has, when we talk about like why capitalism is kind of screwed or has failed, I mean, we're sort of describing, we're looking at a big failure of it right here, which is just that like it can't efficiently allocate capital. The roads you drive on suck. Our bridges fall apart. You can't get to work on time. You're probably never going to be able to own a house. But if you want to own an NFT of a Bored Ape for $200,000, you can. Like, that's a failure of resource allocation.
yeah, and I
And
just
that
want to
to me
say,
is the key point.
even the proposition that Luna begins with there, the fact that it has to be pegged to the value of a US dollar in order to create stability for the people who want to buy this particular form of cryptocurrency, is that not just undercutting the entire premise of cryptocurrency from the outset of your proposition?
I think that they're not like, there's a way in which I think like they're not even like the set of first principles from which they believe that they operate is one where because like, again, like investor community, like they have like all these like nomenclature like FUD that is just about explaining how like negative news, like negative feedback is a, it's
Haters?
if anything legitimation of the mission.
Yeah.
So, and investing also, this is also a case of other like oddball investing communities that like when value of your thing goes down, whether it's like silver or gold, you will have people who will say, aha, it went down in the past before, and they will use some previous behavior and previous turn of the cycle that doesn't actually have any similarity in dynamic, but was just the last time the number went down, and say, well, we know that, like, what it looks like and how it rebuilds. And to me, that is the, sort of like that kind of like, if you're able to create that kind of cosmology in which like all flaws, all failures, just kind of get reabsorbed back into the, belief of like ultimately forward motion, then, all that has to do is like, you have to figure out, well, what sustains that forward motion. And narratively speaking, spending money on Super Bowl ads and shit is a great way to do that if you're not actually able to drum up business by investing in real things. Because marketing, like tourism, is one of those things that you invest in when you don't actually want to, build stable economies with well-paid individuals who could ultimately take charge of their own destiny.
And also, I mean, the fact that so much of the money invested or bought in terms of the cryptocurrency here goes towards marketing in order to get more people to fulfill the multi-level marketing obligation in order to maintain the price of this coin, and you're not even really producing a good, right? Like, there and it's all about celebrity spokespeople. And it's just a trifecta of late stage capitalist indicators and bench points where nothing of value is being produced. Everything is inflating itself and entirely unstable. And it's just about a transferring and replicating dollar figures on a screen while really just stealing it from average people under the guise of, you can be a millionaire just like me. It's like we are living. I know people have said that we're living in an age of widespread fraud, but this example of it? I think, like, I know some people in the audience might be like, why do we focus on crypto so much? What's the point? This is the point. It's because it is a canary in the coal mine for the collapse of our financial system.
Right. I think that a good way to think about crypto, and a reason to pay attention to crypto in particular, is it's not like it's not like in the case of the housing market in like the 2000s that led to the great, the financial crisis and the Great Recession. I think a really important, point of departure, even though that was ultimately the product of probably some of the same loans that were caught up in the S&L crisis in the 80s. I think that you can see in the S&L, in the financial crisis with those, home loans, it's not like the home loan market was not that big. It was, but it led to these, like trillions of dollars in consequences. Why? Well, because there were a whole lot of bets that were built on it that ultimately represented a lot of value that was accounted for that shouldn't have been there. And that, is another kind of allocation crisis, I would argue. And I think with in the case of crypto, it's not a big number yet, as far as we know. Like, even if everything were to fail, but, I think for a lot of people, a lot of people know some individuals who have exposure. We just went through, and we're still going through, the shocks of GameStop and AMC, where you have these companies, large market cap companies, that are basically propped up for no good reason other than some indescribable investor, internet interest at the moment. And the meme stock phenomenon, where you have this thing untethered from value, I think, to me, that's where Joe Weisenthal and Odd Lots has made this connection too. Like, the power of retail does allow for things to grow, perhaps when they shouldn't, in value. And in the case of crypto, it may be enough to help grow it past your critical mass, where, we know, everybody individually knows a bunch of people who are exposed, and those people are represented in Congress by people who are susceptible to pressure. I mean, Kirsten Gillibrand, who, by the way, ran for president not that long ago, is, pimping legislation in the Senate right now, hoping to, effectively regulate crypto as a commodity, and, thus effectively insulating it from the most important kinds of regulation that it would need to face. In general, I think that if we're to kind of, I guess, look sort of, develop an idea of well, what is to be done then if this whole thing is a scam, et cetera, it's got to be I think the crypto thing will only get resolved with the same set of, broader, resolution, or broader resolution that's going to be able to make, substantially unstick our politics. Largely because increasingly, if crypto is able to entwine itself with the political system and then go to zero, much like in the case of the SNLs, it may end up being tied to another, a transition from one political order to another. And in the case of, I think a lot of the way historians view it now, in the case of the 1980s and 1990s, it's, that was the moment of neoliberal takeoff. Especially when it was assured that the stock market surely wasn't going to be eating the S&L crisis. It was going to be the federal government.